here in Vegas, we are protected in a bubble, but back home in New York, in Washington, across the country, people are talking about the news of the day. We may have a constitutional crisis on our hands. The president and his attorney general, we've got Congress. At this very moment, Congress is preparing to possibly hold your successor in contempt of court. The White House is possibly using executive privilege to now protect the entire Mueller report, a report the president has said exonerates him. What's your take on this?
Well, it is an exciting time.
Yeah.
I think we're not at a constitutional crisis yet, and I don't think very close to it. There's been squabbles between Congress and the Department of Justice and cabinet agencies for years over all kinds of discovery questions, documents, and that sort of thing.
So that's just a squabble?
Well, that's what it amounts to, really. One of the differences I saw this morning was that the Chairman Nadler wanted 3 staff people in the meeting and the entire committee to see the documents, and the Department of Justice was saying 2 staffers and only the top 12 people in Congress see the information. So maybe it can be worked out. Usually those things are worked out. They're co-equal branches. The Attorney General represents the executive branch, and the Congress speaks for the Congress. And so there needs to be some respect between them, and we were able to, most of the time, reach an accord.
Come on now.
Well, let's not get breathless about this, okay? Eric Holder was held in contempt of Congress over Fast and Furious. And what happened from that? Absolutely nothing. Because the prosecution for contempt of Congress is then referred to the Justice Department, and Eric Holder said, yeah, I prefer not to be prosecuted. And that was the end of that. And no U.S. attorneys working for that Attorney General were going to prosecute him for contempt of Congress. So this is not unprecedented. In fact, it's not unprecedented in the last decade. So if that wasn't a constitutional crisis, this certainly is not a constitutional crisis. Eric Holder refused under executive privilege to turn over certain information to the Congress about a law enforcement activity. The Congress held him in contempt, and it went away because it's a standoff. So I don't see us at that point at all. I think, quite frankly, everyone is taking their positions, and ultimately the courts will decide this. If the Congress is serious about either wanting to get the unredacted Mueller report and or wanting to get testimony from Don McGahn, well, then they're going to have to go to court to get it. Because I tell you this, if I were McGahn, I wouldn't go.
Why? Because he's already participated?
Well, in part, but there's a bigger issue. He's a lawyer who has attorney-client privilege with the client, this client being the president and the White House. They're now saying, we don't want you to testify. If you're a lawyer, you can't then just say, well, you know what, I've decided your privilege claim isn't good, so I'm just going to go in and talk anyway and tell them everything.
But he already spoke to Robert Mueller for hours and hours.
He had permission from the president to do that. The president's now saying, you don't have permission to do this. Now, there may be some people who say that inconsistency eliminates the privilege, but Don McGahn's not going to decide that. If the Congress is serious about doing this and not just playing political games, then go to court. Make a motion to enforce the subpoena on McGahn, on the report, and let a series of courts, which I'm sure will see this, from the district court to the circuit court and maybe even the Supreme Court, make that decision. But if you're McGahn, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube if you do go and do it. And then they say, oh, well, no, you had privilege. He could wind up getting disbarred for that. And so if I were Don McGahn, I'd say, my client doesn't want me to do it. If you want me to do it, go to court and have a judge order me to do it. If a judge orders me to do it, as an officer of the court, I'm sure he'll comply. But if a judge doesn't order him to do it, he's got to follow his client's wishes.
General, if you say these squabbles have gone on for years, 3 separate parts of government, help me understand this. When you were a senior ranking member of Judiciary, you would ask for documents, and they maybe didn't like handing them over, but you got them during the Obama administration. Then, when you ran the Department of Justice, and the House Judiciary asked for stuff, and they were run by Republicans, you provided it. Now you're an observer, and the House Judiciary is asking for documents, and the Department of Justice is saying,
Well, we didn't get everything when I was on the Judiciary Committee that we asked of the holder.
Not everything,
A
but
lot.
you got a lot.
So when I was up for confirmation, Senator Grassley, the chairman of the committee, said, are you going to give us these records that we've been asking for, and you've been asking for? Your name is on these letters too, Sessions. So we did that. And I think the department owes the Congress great respect. It should provide the documents that it should provide. And I committed to do that, and I think we did a good job of it. We went as far as we could go and made historic advances in giving documents. But I would say that it's not certain. 92% of the Mueller report has been made public. They've given the committee another 6% or so, up to 98.5% been provided. But there is a specific criminal statute that says you cannot provide 6E material, grand jury material, and that's what, as I understand it, the Attorney General is saying he's not able to give.
Okay, so let's say 92% is out, and today the president is calling the investigation and the report, still to this day, a treasonous hoax. When you go inside this report, we know that the president had set his eyes on a large business transaction in Russia. We know that the Trump campaign was eager to possibly work with Russia to get information on Hillary Clinton. And we know that at the very least he was aware of WikiLeaks. And then during the investigation, he attempted to block his own team from assisting with the investigation. So the president, who I know you've spoken to a number of times of unofficially advising, for him to call this a treasonous hoax, what do you make of that?
Well, of course you know, because I was in the Mueller report, so that's how you know I've spoken to the president
But I'm asking
many
today.
times.
The president said it today.
Yeah, listen, the president says lots of things. And there's lots of things the president says that I wish he wouldn't say. I told him all along he shouldn't criticize Bob Mueller. I said, because I think Bob Mueller's going to wind up exonerating you on most things. And then you've been kicking the crap out of him for all this time, and then you're going to want to say some good things about him. Listen.
But he's kicking the crap out of him today.
That's fine. Listen, it's just another day. And it's just another day. And the fact of the matter is that I don't understand why people are surprised by any of this. I've known Donald Trump for 17 years. He is no different today than the day I met him in May of 2002. This is the way he speaks. This is the way he acts. And by the way, this is the way he spoke and acted during the campaign.
So you're saying he's
a
liar and a bully. You get what you get. You don't get upset?
You used those adjectives. I did not. You asked treasonous hoax. He uses these words. He is a salesman. He is at core a salesman who uses hyperbole to try to convince people of his position.
Sir, those are lies.
Well, that's what you say, Stephanie. And
they're not?
I watch that's his opinion. An opinion can't be a lie. That's his opinion. I happen to disagree with his opinion. And I've told him I disagree with his opinion. But he's entitled to his opinion. And he's entitled to say it out loud. He's entitled to tweet it out loud. He's entitled to tweet it in capital letters with exclamation points, as we've all seen, okay?
But sir, the word hoax is not an adjective. It's a noun.
Yeah, I understand. I took English too, Stephanie. I understand. I know what the word is. You don't have to educate me on that. It is his opinion. It's his opinion. Listen. I watch you. You disagree with his opinions every day. You're welcome to. You're a member of the media. And more importantly, you're an American citizen. You have the right to think and agree or disagree with your president in any way that you want to, the same way I do. But he also has the right to have the opinion he has, to express the opinion he has. And you know what will happen, Stephanie? In 2020, the American people will decide. In the context of everything else, they'll decide about Donald Trump's use of language and all the other things that you raise in the context of an exploding economy, in the context of lower regulation, in the context of conservative judges, in the context of a more peaceful world. They'll decide all those things and decide who they want to elect.
I think hoax is a strong word in one sense, just to say this is bogus, I'm innocent, and I've been putting through all this effort, and instead of just saying it's not true, I didn't do anything wrong, he says it's a hoax. But that's his language, and we all gotten used to it by now, I think.
Kind of.
All right, another word is spying. Your successor, Bill Barr, referred to the FBI's activity as it related to the campaign as spying. Yesterday, Christopher Wray of the FBI said words matter, and that is not how he would characterize what happened. What would you say?
Well, I think Chris Wray, didn't he say that that's one way of saying it? He wouldn't have said it that way. I think that spying is a perfectly good word. And then they had this lady, apparently, that was sent in to Papadopoulos. Is that a spy? I mean, I don't know. So I just would say, take more facts to come out. I think that's a mountain out of a molehill myself.
There's legal spying and illegal spying, but both are spying. If you do so because you're authorized by the FISA court or by some other court order to do electronic surveillance, which the subject of that surveillance doesn't know is happening, that's spying. Now, it's authorized spying by a court, and I think what needs to be determined here is not the argument over the word, but the modifier of the word. Since we're going to go English
We're
here.
going English.
We're going
yeah.
high-scale English. Is it legal or authorized spying or unauthorized spying? If the basis of those FISA warrants were deficient and the court was misled, then it's unauthorized spying, and then the Obama Justice Department has a problem. If, in fact, we look at all this and the basis for those FISA warrants were legal, constitutionally and statutorily, then it was authorized spying, and no one likes to be spied on. But if the court authorizes it with a sound legal and factual basis, then that's the way it goes. But spying, we're just arguing over a word. And listen, I know Chris Wray. I love Chris Wray. And that sounded exactly like the Chris Wray I know. He would not have used the language Bill Barr used, but it doesn't mean that Bill Barr was out of line.
When two people from New Jersey go high-scale English, you're in for a treat.
I can tell you.
Could I just
Please.
say on that, I was a young Nixon supporter in law school, and I remember the Watergate and how being mortified by all that, and watched it pretty closely. And one of the main lessons was you do not use your intelligence agencies, the FBI, the IRS, the CIA, to target your enemies. And we've gone through a number of these things over the years, and I suspect the Attorney General is correct that this matter overall, before it's finally concluded, we'll have to examine this predicate question, because the empirical people want to be confident that our federal agencies acted objectively.
Let's stay on the FBI, because you obviously recused yourself from the Mueller investigation. It was the recommendation of the Department of Justice, and you complied. James Comey has said on the record that the FBI knew immediately when President Trump nominated you that you would need to recuse yourself. Why is that?
I don't remember him saying that they knew when I was nominated. Certainly nobody conveyed that to me, and I certainly didn't consider it that way. But after I got there, we discussed it. There's a specific regulation in the Department of Justice that no department attorney can investigate a political campaign that they were a part of. And I had a role in the campaign. And then eventually there were charges that I had something to do with Russia, which is dismissed. But at the time, that was still out there. So I felt I had to recuse myself. And I felt very comfortable that that was the right thing.
You then underwent the wrath of the president for a long time, for 2 years, because you recused yourself. What was that like, and why did you stay on during all of that?
Well, I think it was clear that the president was very upset. He had been told that a special counsel is so disruptive to everything you do, and it turned out to be just about as disruptive as people had told him it would be. And he was worried about that, and so he blamed the recusal on all of the things that happened afterwards. I would just say this. I was prepared to submit my resignation anytime he asked for it, and when he asked for it, I submitted it. And every attorney general, every cabinet person serves at the pleasure of the President of the United States, who is the chief executive officer constitutionally there. And so we're all, and he can't be held responsible for the executive branch if he doesn't have control over who operates it under him.
But you still felt like you had the choice whether or not to recuse yourself. Because Bill Barr had the choice. It was recommended that he should recuse, and he chose not to.
Well, I thought my situation was very clear, and because I didn't feel like as an Attorney General of the United States, and Rod Rosenstein and I talked about it at some length, we needed to restore regular order. We need to create a Department of Justice that people knew was non-political and objective and did its duty. And then the regulation that's in our own department says you can't do it if you're a part of a campaign that's being investigated. So I thought if I'm going to have any integrity and any respect within the department, I would have to recuse myself.
Then, Governor, can you compare the two for me? I know you had been complimentary in the past and said it was a good idea for Attorney General Sessions to recuse himself. But in the same vein, Bill Barr did not recuse himself. And we know that before he took the job, he had weighed in on the investigation, wrote a letter to the president. What's the difference between the two?
Significant difference, because there's a direct regulation on point that General Sessions just talked about regarding the idea of overseeing an investigation to a campaign you were a part of. Bill Barr expressed a legal opinion about some of the stuff that was being looked at, specifically in the obstruction area, and how that compared to presidential powers, and submitted that to the Justice Department for their consideration. The bottom line is that he has the absolute right to his opinion, and he said during his confirmation hearings that if he were confirmed and once he became Attorney General, he would look at the facts that had been gathered and he would decide what he thought was appropriate and not. I don't think they're analogous situations. There's not a direct regulation on point to deal with what Attorney General Barr was dealing with. There was one with Attorney General Sessions, and so I think that that's the real crux of the difference between the two situations. But in the end, for every lawyer, the issue of recusal comes down, in most instances, to that lawyer's view of whether or not they should be recusing or not. And as there are all different kinds of lawyers, there'll be all different kinds of decisions in that regard.
And it was discussed during his confirmation process. It was very public, and so I think he didn't hide that or anything.
And you think he's been unbiased since taking the job?
I think Bill Barr does his best to do the right thing. He was a great Attorney General when I served under him before, when he was Attorney General. He was Chief Counsel at Verizon, a great lawyer, and had the legal position, Office of Legal Counsel in the Department of Justice, which is really the government's top lawyer. And so, yes, I think he's going to do the right thing, and even if the press is critical or not, he knows what's right, and he'll do what's right as he's able, I believe.
Let's talk Rod Rosenstein for a moment, and I want to stay on recusals. He was a witness in the obstruction probe. It's been reported that he had said at some point he might even be willing to wear a wire, and he was a participant, along with Attorney General Sessions, in the firing of Jim Comey. Why wouldn't he have had to recuse himself?
Well, I don't think he had to recuse himself. The point, first of all, there's a lot of things in your question that are presumed because they've been reported, but I don't know that are necessarily factual. Well, first of all, I don't think Rod's ever confirmed that he asked someone to wear a wire. And I think that what I recall Rod saying about that was that he was being sarcastic and he was joking. But Andy McCabe, who is a proven liar, has said that he didn't think it was a joke. I know Rod Rosenstein now for a dozen years. If I have to judge between someone's credibility on that issue, Rod's or Andy McCabe's, given that the Inspector General has already found that Andy McCabe lied in the course of his conduct as Deputy Director of the FBI, illegally leaked information, and then lied about it, I don't necessarily think anything Andy McCabe says should be given a whole great deal of credit.
Okay, then how come just Andy McCabe can be a proven liar and President Trump could be a great salesman?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting MSNBC point. But what I tell you is,
no, you know what? Get out of town with that.
Andy
Seriously.
McCabe, excuse me,
Seriously.
no. Andy McCabe has been found by the independent Inspector General of the Justice Department, appointed by President Obama, to have lied in the course of his job. The American people will decide whether they believe Donald Trump has been truthful or untruthful in the course of his job. They're held to two different standards, Stephanie. I know a lot of people don't like this, but he was elected President of the United States by the American people. They are the ultimate deciders on his truthfulness or untruthfulness, unless he's brought before an impeachment hearing in the House of Representatives and a trial in the United States Senate, which the Democrats like to kind of skirt around, but because they know it's politically stupid to do, they just want to get around the edges of it and imply it, but not do it. Because, by the way, if they wanted to go back to the Don McGahn issue, if they wanted Don McGahn to testify, open an impeachment hearing. Then Don McGahn would have no basis not to come and testify. But they don't want to do that because they're afraid that it would rebound on them the same way it rebounded on Republicans when they did it to Bill Clinton. So Andy McCabe and Donald Trump, as much as Andy McCabe might like to think so, are not analogous figures in the American political system. He is an employee.
I'm not talking about the American political system. I'm talking about two human beings.
That someone else holds Andy McCabe to account. Andy McCabe is held to account by the people in the Department of Justice and was found to have leaked information illegally and lied by the Inspector General. The President of the United States is held to account by two separate entities. The Congress of the United States, which has the ability to impeach if they feel as if that's appropriate and to remove if the Senate votes for it, and the American people who decide who the President of the United States is. They'll make that determination. Remain calm. You'll get that determination in 2020. Or earlier if the Democrats want to open an impeachment hearing. But I'm not going to sit here and allow anybody to analogize Andy McCabe to the President of the United States, whether that President of the United States was Donald Trump or Barack Obama, by the way. They both are absolutely held to a different standard and held to that standard by a different group of people.
You could also be elected to be President of the United States and be a liar.
Oh, I'm sure that's happened any number of times with the 44 people that we've had.
But it doesn't mean that we
hold
decide whether or not he's a liar only on the day when we vote.
You can, Stephanie, you have decided and you can decide. You have the right to do that the same way you have the right to express your opinions every day on television and off television. But it matters only so much as one person. And every one of these people in this audience are going to make their decisions on a whole variety of issues regarding the president come 2020. They may have decided it already, but they don't have the authority to do anything about it till 2020. The only people who have an authority to do something about it before 2020 is the Congress of the United States. And if they want to do it, game on. They want to do it, go ahead and do it. But stop skirting around the edges and acting as if you may do it, but you may not do it, and try to make a political point out of it. Either do it or don't. Otherwise, let's have an election in 2020 and people can decide these issues then. But Andy McCabe isn't elected. He's in a hired, appointed position. He was found by the Inspector General to have lied and to have illegally leaked information, and he was appropriately fired by the Attorney General, I believe. And that's what should have happened. And I can't live with an analogy between a disgraced deputy director of the FBI and anybody, Donald Trump or anybody else who sits in the chair in the Oval Office. The people will decide that, and if Congress wants to, they can too.
Does that mean?
I would just say, it's one thing for political language. Most politicians exaggerate in their language. You can say that's a lie. But he was being investigated by the Inspector General. He asked about a specific event. The Inspector General found that he had not told, he lied. It was sent to the FBI, who has a special committee to evaluate it. They referred it to the Attorney General under the rules of the department, recommending his termination, and I agreed with that, and that's how he was terminated.
Robert Mueller was not comfortable with, how do I phrase it, the context of the summary in which Bill Barr wrote about Robert Mueller's 400-page report. At this point, over 700 former federal prosecutors have signed on to a letter that said if Donald Trump was not the sitting president, he would be charged. Would you sign on to that letter?
Under the rules, there's a regulation for the appointment of a special counsel. He is empowered and directed to make a report to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General is to make the final decision. He concluded that there had not been a Russian collusion, which was what the whole thing was about.
I'm asking about obstruction.
I know I'm getting to that. And then the second part was the obstruction charge, and it falls to the Attorney General of the United States to make a decision. The ball, what did Barr say? He's a grown 68 years old, says It's my baby. I had to make the call. He made his call, and I respect the Attorney General.
Without a doubt. But what I'm asking is these former federal prosecutors, some of which actually worked with both of you, have signed on to this letter to make the point if he were not
They
the sitting
haven't
president,
studied all of
he
this.
would be charged with obstruction. And I'm asking you, do you agree with them?
I can't agree. Well, first of all, I haven't studied it sufficiently to make an opinion.
All right.
And I don't think they probably have either. What do you think, Chris? You think
Yeah.
they
Do you think
already
former federal
studied that report?
prosecutors,
Yeah, they all read the newspaper.
apolitical prosecutors would
Oh,
have signed
stop.
on?
Stop, apolitical prosecutors. Let me just say, I ran an office in New Jersey for 7 years. Every one of those prosecutors who worked for me had an opinion. They had an opinion.
An opinion.
They voted in elections. They are not apolitical. And they're not required, by the way, to be apolitical.
So everyone who signed this has a political agenda?
No, I didn't say, no. Now, don't change the word, Stephanie. I said opinion, not agenda. So don't say they're apolitical. They're not apolitical. They're American citizens, human beings who go to the polls probably in greater percentages than in a lot of other professions and vote and express their opinions. And they look at it and they do the best they can every day to be objective about the way they evaluate facts, but they're not apolitical. The fact is they all have political opinions, and those political opinions, like they affect all of us in this audience, affect their judgment at times as well. Now, I wouldn't sign on to that letter because I don't believe there's a crime of attempted obstruction. And now I've read the whole Mueller report. I don't profess to be an expert in it, but I've read through it once. And I could just tell you that, there were a lot of good people, the guy sitting next to me being one of them, who, when the president decided to pop off and say some things that he shouldn't have been saying or thinking, did not implement the things that the president may have been suggesting through his comments. Well, you know what? That's part of the way government's supposed to work. That's why you hire good people who have integrity. I've been an executive, for 8 years in the state. You hire good people around you, you try to, so that if you're having a bad day, if you're suggesting something that maybe isn't a smart idea, forget about a legal or illegal idea, not even a smart idea, that you have people who are strong enough and have enough integrity to put the brakes on it and then come to you later and go, yeah, I don't think so, not a great idea. I think the Attorney General is an example of one of those people who did that during his time that he served. Rod Rosenstein's an example of one of those people. Don McGahn's an example of one of those people, and there's a number of others that are cited in the Mueller report. And some people have said this is somehow displays a weakness of the president. I don't believe so. I think this is the normal interaction that goes on within administrations where there is significant arguing, and especially in a high-level, high-pressure situation like this. So I wouldn't sign on to it because no one obstructed Bob Mueller. And you know who said no one obstructed Bob Mueller? Bob Mueller, who said that anything he ever asked for, he was permitted to do. Anything that he wanted, he was given. From a
Bob Mueller was?
Absolutely. From a resource perspective, he was never denied a subpoena of anyone that he asked for. He was never denied a search warrant of anybody that he asked for in terms of being authorized by the Justice Department to do it. So it seems to me if Bob Mueller himself has said, there was nothing that came out of the executive branch that stopped me from doing anything I wanted to do.
But he did say in the report that there was a number of information that was deleted, that was unavailable. The president didn't sit down with them. He didn't speak to Bob Mueller directly, so there was certainly more that he would have.
But Bob Mueller never served a subpoena on the president. That was his choice. He could have subpoenaed the president. When the president said, I'll only answer questions in writing, he could have subpoenaed the president. He didn't. That was his judgment.
Then what did you make of Bob Mueller writing the letter to Bill Barr, given that Bob Mueller is such a chain of command guy, and I've heard both of you say pretty exemplary things about him?
Yeah, I think Bob Mueller's a great guy. That is the chain of command.
Why would he write that letter?
Because he was in the chain of command. He saw something that a superior was doing that he disagreed with. He didn't go public and have a press conference. He didn't pull a Jim Comey. What he did was he wrote a letter to the Attorney General of the United States expressing his concerns. That is chain of command. That is doing it the way it's supposed to be done. And I think Bob deserves great credit for having expressed himself in that way. And if he gets the opportunity to testify before Congress, I'm sure he'll do exactly the same thing. But that is chain of command, Stephanie. He didn't go outside of it. He didn't come and give you an interview. He didn't go and hold a big gaggle. He didn't do any of that stuff. People.
The press got the letter.
Well, that's fine, but that ultimately was the Justice Department's determination to give the letter, and Bill Barr released the letter.
I want to ask about tax returns. As much as the president would like the tax return issue to go away, it's not. And now we're seeing Steve Mnuchin under a lot of criticism and pressure to release the president's taxes. What's your position on what he should do or what should be done, General?
I don't know. I haven't researched that issue, and I don't think it'd be wise for me to opine on it. But
why not?
The law requires all candidates, including senators, to file this financial disclosure report. It does not require filing of the income tax returns. And so the president said he's not doing it. And being the fighter he is, he's not doing it until somebody makes him do it. So that's, but I don't know what the legal standard for Mr. Mnuchin to use to decide the question. I really don't.
Governor Christie, what do you think? One of the main reasons people want it is for transparency, so we can understand that the sitting president doesn't have personal or business interests that will compromise him in any way.
Well, listen, I released 7 years of my tax returns before I ran for governor, and I released my tax returns every year that I was governor. And so, listen, but I wasn't required to do it. It was my choice. I made the choice to say, you want to see it? See it. Now, I will have to say with great humility that my tax returns were not nearly as complex or as full of income or losses as Donald Trump's were. So they were a lot easier to understand. But that's the standard.
But it's not about understanding taxes or
No. I'm saying that mine are a lot. It was very easy for me to do it. I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. My wife and I made the decision. We did it. The president's welcome to his opinion. He's welcome to his opinion. He doesn't want it to, and I remember at the time when he didn't release them, and I was running against him at the time, that all of us were kind of like, oh, well, he's dead after this. He's not releasing his tax returns. He's finished. You know, we'd all sit around the debate stage, and that was like one of 30 discussions we had that when he did something, he was done. You know, it just never happens. You know, right. Whether it's the comments about John McCain or the speech he gave when he entered the race. So you go through a whole list of them, and the tax returns is one of them. In the end, Stephanie, I have to say the same thing the Attorney General said. I'm not schooled in what Steve Mnuchin's, legal responsibilities are, what the standard is. So I can't give a lawyer's opinion. I'll give a politician's opinion. I released my tax returns because I thought that was the best way for me to let people know about me and my wife and our financial background. The president's made another decision. That's another way people in this room and outside this room can judge him as a candidate for election the first time and for re-election the second time, unless there is a legal standard that I'm unaware of. And, then if he's held to it, I assume he'll have to comply.
Then as a voter, do you want to see them? We know one of the reasons Michael Cohen is in jail is because he lied to Congress about a potential Trump Tower Moscow deal.
Listen, I didn't have his tax returns and I voted for him. So I guess that's the proof in the pudding. It was not a determinative issue for me.
All right, then let's talk about what you're doing next, because it was less than 3 years ago you were running for president, and you did vote for President Trump. What are your next political ambitions? You could run again.
Sure, I could run again. I mean, but I'm not running now. And so the next time, and I've said that I have no interest in being in a legislative body. No offense to the former senator, but I think he's gotten to know me over time and probably would agree that maybe my personality isn't the one that might be best suited to be one of 100.
He has an executive personality.
And so, I don't know, Stephanie. I would never preclude, running for president again, but that's 2024. And so, who knows? Gosh, I'll be in my 60s by then. No, I'm definitely not. I'm saying I am not running in 2020. No.
How about you, General? Are you done with politics? You obviously gave up your seat in the Senate. It's now being held by a Democrat. What's your next plan?
Well, I haven't made a formal announcement about the Senate race, but I am interested in the issues. To me, the reason I thought Trump was such an unusual potential candidate was he was breaking with orthodoxy on trade, and he's been honest about that. He's still fighting for that right now, and I think that's correct. The American people were right. A lot of the establishment was not. I think he thought that we're in too many wars, and they haven't worked very well, and we've lost a lot from that. I came to that agreement, that view. The American people seem to agree with it. And on immigration, he believes that we should have a lawful system of immigration that serves the national interest, and I agreed with that. So I'd love to see us bring more intellectual heft behind those positions. I think it exists, and maybe I can contribute some in that.
Well, then you seem like you still very much support the president. Had you not recused yourself, maybe you'd still be back in that job. Would you like to be?
I had a great run. I was honored to serve. You only see part of the Department of Justice. That's the big news in Washington. But we led a complete revitalization of the law enforcement community. About 85-90% of the Department of Justice is crime. FBI, DEA, ATF, Marshal Service, prison system. All the United States attorneys in 94 districts throughout the country. We rallied those. The morale is up. They work with local law enforcement. Homicides jumped 12% in 15, 8% in 16, after 30 years of decline. I said we're going to reduce that. The president said reduce crime, and we've done it. Homicide dropped, violent crime dropped, and good law enforcement makes a difference.
Before we go then, do you wish then, in retrospect, you would have signed on to have been more supportive on criminal justice reform? Since you left, we've seen the First Step Act. Jared Kushner had said that Governor Christie actually helped him get that over the line, but it had been reported if you had still been in that seat, you could have been a roadblock for Jared Kushner because criminal justice reform was not a priority for you, though it's gotten a lot of bipartisan support.
Well, I like a lot of what's in the First Step Act and supported. There were a few things that we objected to. Federal prison population in the last 3 years of President Obama dropped from 220,000 to like 180,000. It's a big drop. So part of that was when crime went up. And so I think this bill is not going to be, the parts I don't like are questioned. I don't think it will be a disaster. I think it's got some good stuff in it. And I don't have any problem with that.
All right, we're out of time. I do want to ask you before we go, Governor. This administration, there were different points where you were looking to maybe become a member of it. You're not. Right now, if the president called you up, would you join the team?
Oh, listen, it depends on what he offers. He's offered a lot of stuff. He offered Homeland Security Secretary twice. He offered Labor Secretary twice. Chief of Staff in December. Listen, the president and
So if you didn't want those jobs, if he called, what job would you want?
Well, that's between me and the president. But let me rest your mind. He knows. He knows. He knows what I'd say yes to, and he knows what I've said no to.
Does it rhyme with Schmaturny Menmo?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not good. I'm not a poet, but I can. You'll be shocked to know. But I will tell you that I believe, and I felt this way under President Obama as well, that when the President of the United States calls you and asks you to consider something, you come and you listen, and then you make the decision that's in the best interest of your country and your family. And so that's always the way I'll judge it. And whenever the president calls, if he were to call tomorrow and offer me something, I'd go through the same evaluation. I'd think, am I right for this job, and will I do something that will actually help the country? Do I have the capacity to do that? And then, is it the right thing for me to do for me and my family? You know, for 16 years, I was in public service as the U.S. Attorney and then as the governor. And my wife and my children, you know, endured that in a lot of ways because I was not a low controversy figure. So they read all that stuff, and they're enjoying right now the last year and a half when Dad's been a little bit more low key. So you evaluate all those things together. So the president called, of course I listened to him. Same way President Obama asked me to be on his trade commission as a Republican, I said yes, and I served on it. George W. Bush honored me by making me U.S. Attorney. I said yes. President asked me to chair the Opioid Commission. I did that. So I'll say yes to the things that I have a passion for, an ability for, and that I think are in the best interest of the country and the family. So we'll see if that happens or not. I have no idea. Up to this point, it hasn't. But could things change? Sure, they could change. I always have an open mind, Stephanie.
An open mind and an open heart, it's all I can ask for. Thank you both for your time, for the candid conversation.
Sir?
Thank you.
And thank you from the low-key poet and the former Attorney General and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steph.
Thank you.